Hello and welcome to the European Parliament for Talking Europe. Is Britain saying goodbye to Europe? Well, David Cameron, who is under pressure from the Eurosceptic wing of his Conservative Party, has promised a referendum on the UK's membership. The British Prime Minister, who vowed to wrestle back powers from Brussels, is stretching the patience of his partners. Well, I will soon be joined by the Vice President of the European Parliament and the Financial Times EU correspondent. In the second part of the programme, I will talk to Alain Lamassoure, who chairs the Parliament's Committee on Budget. He will comment on the ongoing battle over the size of the bloc's budget. But we'll start on our set here at the European Parliament to talk about the difficult relationship between London and Brussels, between Cameron and the European Union. Let me introduce you to my two guests on this set. To my left, Isabelle Durand. Welcome to the programme. You're a Green MEP from Belgium. You're the Vice President of the Parliament. You're a true believer in European integration, and you're also part of the Spinelli group. You'll tell us what you think about Mr. Cameron.
Not only I think what I want.
But what you want, that's even better. Also on this set from the Financial Times, Peter Spiegel. Very welcome. You're the chief of the Brussels bureau here in Brussels. You follow EU news very closely. I'll start with you to get your point of view from an Anglo-Saxon. And I'd like to quote the Finnish Minister for European Affairs 2 weeks ago. He said, look, it's almost as if the boat is pulling away and one of our best friends is somehow saying bye-bye, and there's not really that much we can do about it. He's of course referring to Britain. Is Cameron slowly but surely saying goodbye to Europe?
I think he may be, and it may not be a matter of choice. He may be actually just sort of heading that way by inertia. I mean, we have sort of three issues that are coming up over the course of the next month or two. The EU budget, the banking union, and then sort of the wholesale treaty changes for the EU as it tries to integrate. And in all three measures, Cameron is going to have a very difficult time accepting these. We could see 3 British vetoes. If that happens, you start to wonder whether Britain really has a proper future in the EU as it gets closer and closer. Because most of the other Euro outs, as they're called, the ones who are not in the Euro, eventually want to get into the Euro. With the exception of maybe Denmark and Sweden, most of the new member states in Central and Eastern Europe, Poland certainly, Hungary, Czech Republic, even at some point, have agreed through treaty to join the Euro. So that creates, not only a two-speed Europe, but a two-tier Europe, with Britain really the only member state on the out. And I think that's a decision that Cameron may be forced to make, not of his own choosing. It's something where he's headed, but I'm not sure he's doing it consciously.
Isabelle Durand, what's your take on this?
No, I see the strategy of Cameron, but I'm not sure that he knows the real capacity to be totally isolated. And I think that it can be very dangerous. On European level, you don't leave the negotiation table if you are not sure that anybody can shut you in your back. And it could be the case, because sometimes in the different countries we begin to say, okay, please, go back, go at home, we can live without Great Britain. So I think that the Eurosceptic movement in Great Britain, it's not only in UK, it's on other countries also, but especially it's good for the domestic level for Cameron. And if I see the polls, okay, it could be better for him. But on national level, on European level, he lose credibility. It means that it could be very dangerous in the next steps, and you see the next steps in November with the budget question. And on the budget question, you have to say to the people that it's not so easy. If you say cut at home, cut on European level, it's stupid. It's totally stupid. The European budget can help you, your national budget. So I think that it's easy to say. It's a way to foot all the Eurosceptic, but where is the end of this process? I don't know.
You're saying basically it wouldn't be in Britain's interest to leave the EU. Do you agree with this?
Yeah, and I think when you talk to them behind closed doors, most British officials will acknowledge that. I mean, you look at the issues where Britain gets benefit. I mean, to sit around that table and have an impact on the economic policy making of your most important trading partner. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that? The other issues that Britain is running into problems with is what's called justice and home affairs. There's a whole swath of policies that Britain is going to choose to opt out of, but wants to opt back in on things like European arrest warrants. I mean, police issues where there's cooperation anti-terrorism on the EU level, that British police and security services really want to participate. Well, if Britain decides to pick and choose what it wants to participate in, what's the rest of Europe going to say? Well, actually, you can't pick and choose. Maybe we won't let you participate in European-wide policing, European-wide arrest warrants. So there are clearly issues, there are clearly areas where Britain gets clear benefits from the EU. Those are not being articulated by British national leaders in the UK because of the domestic politics right now, which are incredibly poisonous for any British leader, Labour or Tory, right now, to be pro-Europe.
Well, William Edwards has more on Cameron's EU policies. Let's watch our report.
David Cameron is under pressure from the Eurosceptic wing of his Conservative Party to disengage from the EU. The British Prime Minister has assured European counterparts that he doesn't want his country to leave the Union, which it joined in 1973, even though he's promised a referendum on the UK's membership. What he does want are changes in the relationship with Brussels. The British government wants no part in new Eurozone banking legislation, which could have an adverse effect on trading in the City of London. And after making cuts at home, the UK doesn't want to see its contribution to the EU get much bigger as negotiations for a new budget get underway.
Mr. Speaker, we have not put in place tough settlements in Britain in order to go to Brussels and sign up to big increases in European spending. I don't believe that German voters want that any more than British voters, and that is why our governments have led the argument in Europe for fiscal restraint.
Cameron has suggested having one budget for Eurozone countries and another for EU nations that aren't in the currency bloc. While this is likely to cause tension, Germany's Angela Merkel has backed calls to spend EU money more efficiently, while a number of countries, including France, Germany and Austria, are pushing for a budget reduction for the 2014 to 2020 period. Nevertheless, there remains much to disagree on, and Mr Cameron has threatened to use the UK's veto if he doesn't like the outcome of budget negotiations, which take place on November the 22nd and 23rd.
You mentioned the budget earlier. What Cameron says is basically we don't want to leave the EU, we want a new settlement. Is this acceptable for Britain's partners?
What's that, a new settlement? Which content? What means that? Great Britain is not in the euro, not in the Schengen, not in the banking union, not in the fiscal compact. So where? What do we want? And so what's that? Okay, we discuss, but it's not so clear. And I think that on the budget level, we are in a difficult situation. There is not only the 22nd of November with the Council.
I remind our viewers that Britain wants to freeze the current budget.
Yes, but if Great Britain wants to freeze, the European Parliament will not vote the budget. And if we don't vote the budget, because there is a co-decision with the European Parliament, it means that at the end, it's the budget of 2013 with 40% of the budget for the CIP, the Agriculture Common Policy.
You're basically saying if it doesn't sign the deal,
yes,
it will be even worse
increased.
then. Okay.
So it's difficult to
inflation.
define.
Okay, what do you think? What does Cameron actually want? Because we know he's under pressure from the Conservatives, from the Labour as well. But deep inside, what does he want? What kind of settlement is he looking for?
Do he know what he wants?
Well, that's the thing. I'm not sure he knows. I mean, I think this has become very tactical for him, very short term. He's facing now this challenge on the budget. If you look at the British budget, he has cut every single line item except for health and education. Now, if he has to go home and say, I am going to accept some rise in the EU budget, what does that tell his constituents? That tells his constituents that the EU budget is more important even than health and education in Britain. Now, that's a bit of oversimplification, but that clearly is where
it's
Labour
a hard sell.
It's a very hard sell, and Labour is taking advantage of this. They've gone to the Parliament. Labour, normally the pro-EU party, much more pro-EU, is now calling for a cut in the EU budget. So clearly they're playing political games here. So for that reason, I don't think we have a long-term vision of what Britain wants its role to be in Europe. And I think they're buying time now. They've set up this project headed by the Foreign Secretary to look at what Britain wants out of the EU, what it gets out of the EU. They've delayed
He promised
that
a referendum as well.
But again, this is all looking 2014, 2015. I mean, pushing this off, I think, in hopes that perhaps the economy turns around, perhaps these issues become less incendiary. And I think he's just buying for time now, because I think you're right. I don't think he has in his mind just yet what exactly this new deal with Europe is going to look like.
But it means that it's very dangerous for Europe on this moment, very difficult moment for the European integration, because it means that it's a real perfect demonstration of the inability of a system with only federation of member states, because there is always a national agenda, election, regional pressure, etc., Eurosceptic populism, etc., etc., and every decision cannot be done because of the national agenda. So it means that we have to go further. That's my point of view. Further regarding European integration. Of course, it's totally unacceptable for the UK. When you open the door with a Eurosceptic, the door will never be closed, and that's very dangerous.
That's very true. I would just argue that I think it is a general conventional wisdom amongst not only politicians here in Brussels, but also economists, that to get out of the current crisis, more integration is needed. Creating a Eurozone that is more like a federal structure that has all the benefits of a Treasury Department and whatnot. Now, the problem is, it is not just Britain that doesn't share this vision. I mean, we've seen recent elections in France, for instance, the first round of elections where you had Mélenchon and Le Pen get a third of the vote, running on a very overtly anti-EU.
Finland is another
Finland just had
example.
local elections where we had the True Finns poll about 15% of the vote. The Netherlands, although in the end of the day they picked a government that is pro-Europe, for about several months it looked like about a third of the parliament was going to be the far left and the far right anti-Europe. So we've seen this conventional wisdom questioned throughout the Eurozone, and it's not just Britain. So I think, as you said, this short-termism is being dealt with by all European politicians. And I think this is a real difficulty to getting towards a solution for the crisis, because if all sort of the European elites, including economists, say we must go down this road towards greater integration in the Eurozone, and the voters say we don't like this, what happens? And I think that's the real danger over the next year to 18 months, is that the voters start resisting that integration movement.
No, I fully agree. It's not only the UK is a little bit the caricature. So
because Euroscepticism has very old roots in Britain. But whose fault is it? Why haven't the British never liked the European Union?
That's maybe the case, and maybe it's not.
But who's responsible for it? Do you think it's because of the politicians who never liked the idea? Is it the media in Britain? Why is it that Euroscepticism is so entrenched in Britain?
Well, I don't know why. Maybe it's in the past and before, even before the adhesion of the Great Britain in the European Union. I don't know. But what I know, it's not only in Great Britain, so you say it, in other countries and even in countries with very federalist, very pro-European, you feel the same. And why? Why? Because today it's easy for an elected people on national level to defend that Europe is responsible of all the problems. So
the scapegoat.
Yes, and it's the case in France. And you have on each election the extremists who are winning. Or extreme left or populist demagogic parties. It's very dangerous. So we have, as responsible politicians, we have to say something about that. We cannot accept and to be prisoner in this trend, a very dangerous trend, not only for Europe as such, but for all the European citizens in the world of today and the world of tomorrow. All the challenges have to be done together. We cannot on financial and economic level, but also on climate change question after Sandy, etc. But in all the different important questions, we have to do that. So I think that the integration, the big jump, is absolutely necessary.
Now, the new rift between London and Brussels started a year ago when Mr. Cameron vetoed the fiscal pact that was regarded, of course, as a sort of velvet divorce. In retrospect, was it a mistake or a good thing for Cameron to veto the fiscal pact?
I guess it depends on how you view it. From domestic political perspective, it was very successful. His popularity went up, and a difficult coalition arrangement that was showing some cracks was suddenly unified. I think over the long term, he's paid the price for it. It is unclear exactly what he got for this. You know, he is now on the outside looking in the fiscal compact. He got no concessions for it, and now on any number of these issues we're talking about now, he has no sympathy from his political interlocutors here in Brussels. To get back to the issue of British Euroscepticism, though, I think you need to go back towards what is the founding event of this project. It is World War II. And there is the logical and then there's the emotional ties to Europe. Britain may have the logical ties to Europe. It understands that a common market is good for all, it rises all boats. But the emotional and theological ties to Europe, it just doesn't have, because it did not experience the kind of conflict that Europe experienced, the continent experienced during World War II. And for that reason, I think you've always seen Britain on the outside looking in. It didn't join until the 1970s. Even then, it was very difficult. We saw the Prime Minister at the time, Harold Wilson, try to do a similar kind of game here where he got a new deal with Europe before they had a referendum in Britain to join the EU. So it's existed since its beginning. And I think the different experiences in World War II are still very real. I mean, it was 70 years ago, but I think they're still very close to the surface when you talk about national attitudes towards Europe and how various policies are reflected in that from London, from Paris, and from Berlin.
One last question. Cameron is clearly testing the water. He's also testing the patience of his partners. Apparently, Merkel seems to be losing patience over Mr. Cameron. Is there a sense of irritation here in Brussels that Britain has one foot in, one foot out, and that it's basically preventing the rest of Europe from moving forward?
Yes, there is irritability now on the Council level, but also on the European Parliament level. It's difficult to understand why and how you can continue with one foot in and one foot outside. So I think that it's, so I said, it's not so brilliant strategy regarding the European credibility. If UK want to go outside, okay, go outside. At the end, you have to make a choice. Do you want to be a state of United States, or do you want to be a real participant country of the European level?
European capitals have to make, continental European capitals have to decide how they're going to approach this British question as well. I think, to be honest with you, France has always been the country that's been most skeptical about British membership. At the Council, at one of Sarkozy's last European summit meetings, he turned to Cameron and said, let me get this straight. You want us to solve the Eurozone crisis, and in exchange, you want to extract a price from us. The French have really been, we want an EU of 17, the 17 members of the Eurozone. Now, traditionally, Germany has been the one that wants to keep Britain in. It sees its allies in Scandinavia, in Northern Europe, more free market. Eastern Europe as well. The countries that tend to be a little bit more free market, a little bit more trade-oriented. And so they've always been one that tries to pull Britain back in. But you've started to see opinions in Berlin change, as you mentioned. Is it worth it now? Is the price to pay to keep Britain in too much? And so I think, while London will have a huge say in where Britain sits in the EU, you're starting to see that debate happen here in Brussels and in Paris and Berlin. And to be honest with you, I think it's worth watching there even more closely than it is in London right now.
Peter Spiegel, Isabelle Durand, thank you very much. And please stay with us on Talking Europe. We'll bring you a close-up interview with Alain Lamassoure. He will tell us more about this ongoing battle over the size of the EU budget just after Newsbreak.